Are you ready for this?
Hell yeah. Hello and welcome to the Hackaday podcast. I'm Elliot Williams.
And I'm Kristina Panos.
This is episode 300. Woohoo! The Dwingeloo 25-meter dish, a dead tech twofer, and deconstructing PCBs. Wow, finally 300.
Hooray!
Hooray! This week in Hackaday News, we just announced the call for proposals for Hackaday Europe in 2025, the faraway future. We will be having another Hackaday Europe back in Berlin, and it's going to be March 15th and 16th. That's the Saturday and Sunday after Embedded World in Nuremberg, if you're there. We'll also be doing something the night of the 14th, so if you're in town early, please keep your evening free. We'll go out and get some drinks, have some food, have a good time Friday night. But the main day is Saturday the 15th. We'll do a good long half day, a half day and a half, a 3/4 day on the 16th with some brunch and lightning talks and badge hacking results. The crazy cool thing about Hackaday Europe this year is actually related to the badge. The badge relied heavily on the SuperCon add-ons, the standardized add-ons, the simple add-ons, the SAOs, and we had a contest for crazy designs, and 4 of them were picked and will be manufactured and in everybody's goodie bags. And that was a bendy wavy man one, a fully working multimeter one, the SAO sketch, which was pretty cool, Etch-a-Sketch one, and last but not least, a Vectrex on a bunch of LED matrix. All of these will be in your bag, along with the SAO badge. So you want to go even if you don't want to give a talk, but we want you to give a talk. So if you've got an idea for it, either a 20-minute or a 40-minute technical talk, / tales of hacking, daring do, / project that you got really interested in, / whatever you are up to, come and tell us about it. Head on over to Hackaday. We'll throw the link in the show notes, but it's called Hackaday Europe Call for Proposals, CFP. There is a form there. Fill out your abstract, tell us something about you, and we will get to selecting it at the middle / end of January. So deadline is coming right on up. Don't take too super much time. I guess, what did we say? January 14th is when we'd like the call proposals to be in. So mull it over the holiday season. Come New Year 2025, start typing in your form.
Mull it over some mulled wine.
Right? That's why they call it mulled wine.
Yeah, that's what I thought, at least.
Sounds good to me. Mull it while you're mulling your wine.
Mull it while you're getting a mullet.
Extra points for people with mullets, and get your proposals in by January 14th.
This is a journey into sound.
What's that sound?
What's that sound?
And that should get us on over to What's That Sound?
Ooh.
This week is a reveal what the sound was week. That is to say, you all guessed last week, and we will pick a winner this week. I had a feeling that there would be a ton of responses and or correct answers to this one, and we were not disappointed.
Huh. That's really nice. I don't know what it is, though. I've got nothing.
That is the startup sound, I guess, in the menu sound for a Nintendo Wii.
Oh, yeah. I started and stopped with the 64.
Fair enough.
Pikachu's cheeks light up when it's working. Yes, I have a Pikachu 64.
Do you really?
I do.
Fantastic. Well, yes. Okay, so Nintendo Wii. I was like, oh, we're going to get about 100 people. Indeed, we got 114. Yeah, 114 responses. 3 of them were wrong. So, and one's a duplicate. Wait a minute now. Ooh, Skeets trying to pull that over on me. So I guess 110 correct answers out of 113. I mean, Tom did point this out after I mentioned it. He's like, well, it is only the highest selling video console of all time ever. And I'm like, oh, yeah.
Well, there's that.
That may be a little common, but we have one actually plugged in downstairs. It was, my wife thought it'd be a good, like, starter first video game console for my son, because all the games are basically non-violent, kid-friendly, super fun, You just kind of get in, play it for a bit, and get out. Not yet designed to be addictive. Not yet manipulative of the people playing them. And then it turns out a couple of his friends also are playing Wii games, which I think is crazy in 2024.
Oh, that's good.
But then you scroll through the comments here and you get, people like Riley. It's the Wii menu sound. Me and my girlfriend found ours last week and have been going through our favorite games. Or Andy G, Nintendo Wii welcome sound. My son was playing Transformers on the Wii when I listened to the podcast. What? So a couple people are actually currently playing their Nintendo Wiis as we speak. 2 people responded, both Moogle and Ed responded that this is the only thing they've ever waited in line to buy. Ed did it twice, once for his niece.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that's really super. A lot of people happy about the Nintendo Wii. I was going to say nostalgic, but, like I said, I haven't played a Wii video game for at least 2 weeks now. Good nicknames in this one. We will rock you. We. Like in French, we and we and we and we.
Nice. Tony.
Exactly. We chime Fred. We scream for ice cream. Anyway, thanks everybody for entering this one. I do lack, as predicted, a 110-sided die.
Oh.
Let's see what happens. I'm going to use my NIST random number generator. They've got a really big die. I mean, metaphoric. So I'm going to pull down the randomest number in the whole internet, certified random by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And my absolutely 100% random number is 48.
Ooh.
And congratulations to Kelvin. Oh my God. The sound starts with Elliot typing frantically. Then Tom starts his usual cursing at Have to Guess the Sound. And then the Wii finally plays and the hinge screen music. Yeah, that's correct. Home screen music. That might be autocorrect, but whatever. That is correct. That entire sequence of sounds did happen. So congratulations, Kelvin. I'll get you an email, get you a podcast t-shirt. Everyone else, listen next week. I've got a really cool sound already. Just stumbled on it today. So I'm looking forward to playing it for you all next week. It's actually really cool.
Oh, good.
So without further ado, let's start up the hacks. Oh, from the Nintendo Wii to the PlayStation 1. PlayStation motherboard sanded and scanned, but there's more to do. This is a project by Lawrence Brody, and he is taking the PS1, the original PlayStation, and working on reverse engineering the PCB for it. This is actually easier than it sounds in a way. The PS1 had a 2-sided PCB. I'm astounded that a device this complicated can be made on a 2-layer PCB, as are a number of people in the comments. Somebody was like, I can't even design anything like that on 4 layers. But back in the day, they had to, man. Must be a bunch of 0-ohm jumpers and some really clever routing. Just looking at the board, they're not shy with the vias, but you'd have to be to get this done on 2 layers. I mean, this is basically a preservation/archiving effort. He took pictures of all the chips. He pointed a hot air gun at the thing and took them all off, cataloged them all, and then took a sandpaper and some elbow grease to the PCB and started sanding it down. Took all the solder mask off and made some really nice, clean scans of the bare copper. What's left to do is turn this all into a netlist, and that, I think, is a fair amount of work. Although Walrus came in the comments and said just feed it to some schematic capture software. I don't know what software is capable of reading it off of silkscreen like this, but he says, quote, all of the layout tools I've used support this method. I would love to see that. If anyone knows how to easily go from sanded down copper board, clean images here, to a net list, and then from that to like a schematic, I think that would help out Lawrence a lot. So drop him a line, head on over to his GitHub, linked in the show notes, and give him some help there, because I think this is a really neat project. And someone else in the comments, I guess they found the service manual for the PS1. And so that has some things, but I don't think it has full schematics in it. And so, if you're interested in preserving the history of video gaming or whatever, having a working device to play some of these games on is super important. And while the PS1 is, of course, completely emulated in software these days, there was actually a legal case, I think just a month ago or so, that puts the legality of running emulated in software in question. That's a horrible precedent because I do think that the history of video games is going to be an important cultural history of ours. You know, it's not something that we should just let fade away. So I applaud this project for that. But back onto the Hackaday side, this was a particularly easy board because, like I said, all you had to do was hot air the parts all off and start sanding. If you have a board with more layers, things get obviously more complicated. And there was a great talk by Joe Grand back in 2015. I'll throw the link in here, called Deconstructing PCBs, where he suggests a whole bunch of hacker available ways to get into the inner layers of a multi-layer board. The great way to do it is throw it in a CT scanner. But if you don't have a CT scanner, you know, there are all the other hacker ways. Joe does mention the sandpaper method. It sucks to have to sandpaper through, you know, epoxy glass fiber layers. That would be lousy, but is totally doable. The right way to do it, I think, if you can get your hands on a surface grinder, is to use a surface grinder. If you can't get your hands on a surface grinder, I bet you can get your hands on a bench grinder and rig up some kind of sled that would do that also fairly equally. So, you know, there may be some really clever hobby ways to do this. Joe experimented with just putting it in a CNC mill and carefully milling the layers down, and actually got some good success with that. But that was a cool technique. I also remember seeing a really great talk at Chaos Communication Congress about it a few years back, and I couldn't find the link for that. I'm sure we wrote it up, but I can't find the link. If anyone can remember that talk, it was another really good one on destructively reverse engineering PCBs. And finally, we had a talk from Remoticon. Eric Schlepfer, aka Tube Time, came by and gave a great talk. And this one actually focuses a lot on the mapping the netlist out graphically on the PCB. So if you have to do that manually and maybe less than destructively, Eric's talk is a really good one too. If you're in the same boat as Lawrence and you need to reverse engineer a PCB to keep an old circuit alive, there are a bunch of options for you, and none of it looks impossible. All of it looks like it just takes a little bit of work.
I have something decidedly less high-tech for my first hack. I chose the audiophile carrot, and this is the work of Julian Krauss, but there's a backstory here. 4 years ago, a Redditor named Bolt999 didn't have the proper female-to-female audio adapter for a couple of RCA plugs lying around. And so they used a baby carrot to great success instead. So more recently, YouTuber Julian Krauss set out to prove that this would actually work and was somewhat surprised by the result. So naturally, he started by dropping a cool 1,000 on a bag of audiophile quality baby carrots, as you do, and got to work recreating the setup. Now, as you might expect in the video, for comparison, Julian plays the same audio side by side on an inorganic connection and then on the baby carrot connection. I couldn't hear much of a difference personally, although I thought the carrot actually sounded better for some reason. Julian says it's because the carrot delivers more treble.
Ah.
Yeah. So then he tries to quantify the audio quality of the carrot by taking some measurements, and he actually discovered that the signal-to-noise ratio of the carrot setup was around 110 dBA, which is way higher than that of a 16-bit CD. So that's pretty interesting. I don't really get all that, but I thought that was pretty interesting. So those were definitely audiophile quality carrots, I suppose, based on the results. And for science, this is kind of gross, but Julian let the setup sit around for a week and found out that there was not much organic material left to test. Mm-hmm. And it turned purple. Which is interesting, because there are purple carrots out there.
Yeah, but not gross, fuzzy purple carrots.
Right. Desiccated, yeah.
I mean, they're out there too, but, you know, don't eat them. I mean, what do you expect? Conducts is conducts, right?
Yeah.
It's got a lot of water and I guess enough salt / electrolytes / whatever in it. I mean, I have to say, I'm not horribly surprised, but it's pretty damn funny to see it done.
I guess at the end he threatened to maybe try a pickle. So I hope that happens. He's like, don't make me try this, but I think maybe he will.
Pickle should work perfectly.
Yeah.
Different vegetables for different genres of music.
Ooh, yeah.
Death metal requires, a good firm cabbage, and
A jazz zucchini.
apples for easy listening. My next hack comes from Crack Overflow. SmartFun runs home server. This is a really cool repurposing of an old smartphone type hack, and it's actually pretty simple at its most basic. He just buys a Samsung OnePlus 6T phone on the used market, picks them up because it's particularly cheap, but also because post-market OS is known to work very well on it. And at that point, it's just, do the right Spock grip to get it in its bootloader mode, install post-market OS, and boom, reboot it. You've got a Linux machine on it. After that, he installs Docker and whatever he wants. Like, the install of the server part is incredibly trivial. And if anyone's ever installed a custom OS on a phone, it's just exactly the normal thing. What's clever about this, though, is that then he wants to run it permanently in his house as a server. And so what you have to do is fool it into running continuously. And obviously it's not going to run forever on the battery. And especially if you buy an old one of these, the battery may be sketchy and about to die anyway. It may not want to run eternally plugged into the USB. What he does is a hack that was suggested by the Great Scott YouTube channel a bunch of years back. I'll throw that link in here too, which is to take out the battery, desolder the BMS, the battery management circuit, from the original pouch battery, and then plug in your 5 volts minus a little bit into that. That doesn't quite work because the phone then thinks it's on a battery all the time. And so it goes into power saving mode, even though the battery's running, at obviously full voltage. It says, oh, I'm being battery driven, and the phone might want to go to sleep. So the trick around that then is to also give it power over the USB plug. Here, the final quote circuit is basically a diode going into the salvaged BMS and then splitting off that and doing power into the USB plug. And so this gives the phone a fake battery that's at full charge and power supply over USB, which makes it think it's awake and being line powered the whole time and turns it into an always on server. I just think that's really cute because there are all sorts of things you could do with a little computer that has a camera and a screen and, who knows what sensors and good Wi-Fi on it, right? Like, a classic hack is to install some software that lets you use it as a webcam, basically. That's quick and easy. A lot of people who have 3D printers are using Octo for Android and installing Octoprint on there. And so you can have the phone both run your 3D printer and do time-lapse photos of it.
Nice.
Yeah, that's really cool. And, if it's free, it's free. I'll throw a link in the show notes to how to set that up. Just all sorts of things you could do with this. If you need an extra computer like this sitting around and you've got an old cell phone. Or, as I think the person who posted this on the Crack Overflow board suggested, you could actually buy a particular phone, in this case the OnePlus 6T, that's known to work well with post-market OS and have an easily removable battery. And that maybe means going to find a slightly older phone, but on the other hand, if you look on eBay, you probably can find one for $20. So it's kind of a bargain for all the hardware you get. Makes me want to go look up what phones work best with post-market OS and pick up a couple while they're still cheap. Oh yeah, on the battery management circuit removal step, I will note that the picture is labeled "remove carefully, very dangerous." And that's because you're desoldering / cutting with a knife very close to a LiPo pouch battery. And yeah, that's probably a legitimate warning. I've desoldered some BMSs off of LiPo packs before, and it hasn't gotten me yet, but I also see how it could. So, like they say, remove carefully.
Proceed with caution.
Peel the Kapton tape off and, desolder as fast as you can on those little tabs, and everything should be good.
Next up, I chose Magic Eye images in your spreadsheet. This comes from Dave Richardson. Do you remember these Magic Eye things that were all the rage in the late 90s and early 2000s?
Oh, yeah.
I could never see them, and I remember getting really, really fed up with trying, and I figured it was bad for my eyes anyway. Well, it turns out I still can't see anything in these Magic Eye images, even if they're done via Excel spreadsheet. But here's the deal. If you add a background color to each cell in a spreadsheet and then resize the cell widths to make them square, then you have pixels when you zoom out. Dave gets into the how it works a bit as well as the math behind making these images, which is pretty cool. If you want to make one, just download Dave's Excel file, which has 3 tabs, raw, parameters, and final. Final, of course, has the final image, and the raw tab holds the depth map, and parameters allows you to adjust num colors, backshift, and multi-factor. But if you don't have Excel lying around, Jenny confirmed that it does work with LibreOffice, so that's cool too.
I love these things. I've got a wall-eyed thing where if I don't concentrate on looking straight up, I actually look diagonally up. And that turns out to be really great for defocusing, for whatever it is, deconverging your eyes in exactly the right way to see Magic Eye images. So I'm like the Magic Eye seeing Superman is what I'm saying.
You can see them really fast?
Yep.
You don't have to
I'm really
work
pretty
at
good
it?
at it. Yep.
Nice.
I just have to look up a little bit without trying to. The muscles that with most people pull their eyes straight up are actually like physically off to the side on my eyes. My pull straight up muscles are mislocated a little bit off to the side. It's physiological, but it gives me this extra secret superpower, so I'll take it.
Well, that's pretty cool.
And so funnily enough, Jenny picked an image that was not very well cropped for
I
this
saw
one.
that in the comments.
And everybody in the comments was like, hey, wait a minute. And she's like, but I can't see it. So I went in there and I cropped a better one in there. So those of you staring at it, you won't see an X. You might see something else. I won't ruin it for you. No, I love Magic Eye things. And I actually linked to a tutorial about making them in the comments as well. Or you can go through the Excel spreadsheet and figure it out that way. Our next story comes from the C.A. Muller Radio Astronomy Station, aka the Dwingeloo 25-meter dish. And this is amateur radio operators detect signals from Voyager 1. And in case you don't know, Voyager is this like 50-year-old space probe that is now 25 billion kilometers from planet Earth, 4 times the distance from here to Pluto. And yeah. And this is the story of a bunch of Dutch radio amateurs who've managed to at least hear the carrier signal from this thing. And that's pretty crazy and sounds almost impossible until you realize that this group has access to a 25-meter radio dish. And although it wasn't designed for this frequency and they had to reinstall a new antenna in there. So, the thing that's at the antenna horn was designed for other frequencies. And so they had to fix that all up. They did and managed to get signal from Voyager, the farthest away man-made anything. And that is alone pretty damn cool. What I think's really cool about this, though, is partly the background story behind their receiver. It used to be used by the government, and then they gave it up. And they're like, hey, we have this giant satellite dish. Does anyone want it? And a bunch of amateur radio enthusiasts were like, hell yes, we would like it. And so they've been doing a bunch of crazy things with it, and we've covered them before. Actually, in February of this year, there was that Japanese moonlander mission that actually kind of fell a little bit sideways on the moon when it landed. But it had an amateur radio beacon project in it, and they managed to use their dish to pick that up. Previously, they've done experiments with radaring the moon using a simulated LoRa chirp, which is pretty cool. They had something put together on this dish that would put out 350 watts and were able to bounce it off the moon and get basically, you're not going to be surprised that the moon is round, but their radar image very clearly shows that the moon is round, which is pretty damn cool in my book. Radaring the moon is pretty awesome. So they're basically having a lot of fun over there, it sounds like, with this gigantic radio telescope dish, like you would.
As you do.
Well, and they're not alone. I'll throw some links in here. They're actually not the first amateur project to have tuned into Voyager. Strangely enough, Daniel Estevez, who is a phenomenally involved space radio amateur listener, had some time at the Allen Telescope Array, which is, I guess it was donated to the SETI project by Paul Allen, and I don't actually know its status. It may have been decommissioned and put back together, but long story short, Daniel managed to get some time on it, pointed it at Voyager, and also managed to hear back from it. Of course, that was 4 years ago when Voyager was like a lot closer to the Earth than now. Like it was only like 24 point something billion kilometers and not the full 25. Plus, the Paul Allen array is actually a lot bigger. I think it's about 3 times the size of the Dwingeloo 25-meter dish. It's an array of space telescopes. Anyway, all this stuff is super cool, and I just think it's really great that when large and extremely well-funded science projects are over, they hand them over to radio amateurs to play with. And I just think that is, by itself, so darn cool.
Well, next up is a title donated by Al Williams, Do 3D Printers Dream of Lego Sheep? And it comes to us from Balazs from Racing Brick, which is a YouTube channel, by the way. So there's this Lego goat out there that's rare because it was only ever produced with one set that came out 10 years ago. I have a different goat that I suppose isn't that rare because it's not spotted or whatever, but it is sought after nonetheless. It came with a minifigure a couple series ago, and it's pretty highly sought after. Anyway, Balazs from Racing Brick, he started by duplicating a Duplo sheep using the CR-Scan Otter scanner from Creality, which looks like a really capable machine. It took a couple of scans to get the whole thing stitched together, but he got there with the sheep, which looks pretty darn good. The goat was more difficult because the scanner has trouble with reflective Lego ABS, but Balazs fixed the issue by adding a bunch more tracking points. Although the printed goat stuck down well to a plate, the stud on top turned out to be a bit smaller than it's supposed to be. So, if you're looking to scan and recreate Lego parts, just be warned that they'll be pretty good, but not perfect. I suppose that's the moral of the story.
Yeah, I've always wanted to know what these kind of desk-size 3D scanners are good for. The best examples I've seen are like where you have something you want to model and you want to fit it to a part that is kind of organic and difficult to model that exists already in the real world, right? So you scan that in and then you use that to design your part around. I think that's pretty cool. I can't imagine ever needing to duplicate Lego Duplo parts. But maybe. This video is probably secret advertising for Creality's device here, but I wonder how it does. I wonder how it does stack up against, cell phone photogrammetry options out there. I wonder if it really is all that much better or if it is basically a cell phone in a fancy box.
It seemed easy to use. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure they have good software for it. Yeah, but I'm not going to pony out $700 for I want to screw around with this thing.
Oof.
So I think instead the do-it-yourself photogrammetry solution is probably the way to go.
Is there a makerspace or a library makerspace near you?
Yeah.
With a scanner? That's good.
No. I mean, yes, but no scanner as far as I know.
Oh.
I wonder if anyone's worked on a scanner project. Ooh, while looking for 3D scanning links, I got a really nice article written by Donald Papp, What to Expect from 3D Scanning and How to Work with It. This is kind of a hands-on piece by him trying to do some 3D scans himself and print out the results. There's going to be some cleanup. You're going to have to do some work. All right, here comes Quick Hacks.
Quick Hacks.
So my first quick hack comes from Kelvin, the math behind the music of the 80s. This is a dive into the DX7, and it's a really neat write-up of how it did the frequency multiplication and the sines and cosines that make that sweet, sweet FM bell sound that you know and love from all of your favorite post-83, pre-88 musical tracks.
Oh, sure.
What's love got to do with it? Next up, Dane Coutron, Chaotic System Cooks Meat Evenly. From his write-up, have you ever noticed that a gyro sandwich is only cooked on a single axis? Why not a gimbal? And that is the experiment here. Instead of, a turning spit, he has 3 rings that turn all inside of each other, and one of them, the outside one, is driven because the piece of meat he has on the middle isn't perfectly spherically symmetric. When he turns it, this results in it spinning all sorts of chaotically and getting perfectly cooked from every different angle. Mostly, I think this was just a gag for a fun physics nerd picnic, but there ain't nothing wrong with that. And last up, Jeff Geerling takes a look at the new Raspberry Pi 500 and the case of the missing M2 slot. I don't know if it's missing. I mean, the Raspberry Pi 500 is the Pi 5 version of their all-in-one keyboard/computer thing. And because the Pi 5 is capable of doing M2 natively, a lot of people thought that maybe they would put an M2 slot in the new one-piece computer unit. And it looks like they have the footprints there on the PCB, but they're unpopulated. And so when Jeff tears it apart, he discovers this and took a stab at repopulating it and getting it working, but didn't get success. I don't think that means that no one will. So if you're interested in putting M2 on a Raspberry Pi 500, it's probably worth buying one and giving it a shot, because my guess is somebody will work it out in fairly short order. It's really sweet. Jeff comes by the comments and posts up himself on how his progress is going. He and Maya have a little back and forth. Love it when the community gets involved. Thanks, Jeff, for swinging by.
My first quick hack is RAF GAJ78's updated mouse ring does it with a joystick. Now, the thumb's proximity and range of motion relative to the rest of the hand is quite useful and natural to move about. So what if you put this to work? That's what RAF GAJ78 did, creating a mouse ring that uses a pushable joystick for input. The guts of this thing is a Seed Shao NRF52840, and it's programmed in CircuitPython, so it's a pretty accessible project. This is actually version 2, so if you're more into a 4-way of buttons than a joystick, go check that one out instead. It's linked in the post. Anyway, there are a lot of updates in version 2 to consider, like trading a power switch for deep sleep mode. The joystick version is also easier to assemble and comes in a wider range of ring sizes. There are 2 modes in this thing. The first one has the joystick covering left and right mouse click as well as wheel up and down, with the push action set to recover the microcontroller from deep sleep. In the second mode, the joystick axis moves the mouse pointer around and you push down to left click. Very cool. Up next is Chris Wilkes, an engineer's perspective on baking gingerbread houses. Now, usually gingerbread houses are held together with delicious structural icing, but as Chris Wilkes says, this one is held together with your imagination, sort of. It's a trompe-l'oeil gingerbread house, this one, and you can only view it correctly from one angle. So how the heck did Chris manage this? By using the hidden true perspective projection function in FreeCAD, which evidently is a rarity in CAD programs, this type of function. Using this, he was able to calculate out the force perspective required to make this happen. Chris then printed out the neat-looking support structures and baked up the gingerbread, setting it up just right to create the illusion. A lazy Susan, of course, is essential, so you can see it from all angles. And lastly, we have Inbar Raz. Unexpectedly interesting payphone gives up its secrets. Now, Dan Maloney starts by pointing out that US payphones were basically just ruggedized versions of home telephones with coin mechanisms in them. Even so, I have always been fascinated with them. Now, Inbar Raz got a hold of a payphone from Israel and set about reverse engineering the thing. Inbar had to start with some locksmithing as it was still tightly secured, but once he gained access, he found the internals quite complex, including a motherboard that looks like it came out of a 90s PC, with through-hole components and everything. Then Inbar went after the firmware, pulling code off of an Atmel flash chip. The code was written for the CDP 1806 CPU, which is a later version of a more popular Fringe CPU. So Inbar ended up having to write a new processor definition file for Ghidra so that he could reverse engineer the firmware. By this point, he understood 1806 assembly well enough to reflash the phone and make it print debugging messages on its built-in LCD. Then he could tell what routines were being called under which air conditions. Very cool.
Well, it's time for our Can't Miss articles. These are long-form pieces written by our Hackaday writing staff. This week I'm cheating. I'm going to give you guys a dead tech twofer. I'm picking both Jenny List's disc film, When Kodak Pushed Convenience Too Far, and Maya Pasha's The Hovercraft Revolution and Finding the Right Niche for a Technology. Because I think both of these are stories of inventions that are really neat and are trying to serve particular ideas, but then end up failing just because of the challenges in making them do what they do, and then the compromises that they have to make these kind of impossible seeming things work that then kind of Achilles heel the whole project. So let's start off with the hovercraft. They're really cool. Everybody likes air hockey. Everybody likes things that float magically. The hovercraft isn't as durable as you'd like it to be. The skirts kind of wear over time. They're loud as all hell. They take a lot of energy to lift them up off the ground. Whereas if you compare it to, say, a boat, which just floats, or a car, which rolls on wheels, there the extra weight doesn't cost you anything. But with a hovercraft, it's kind of like an airplane. If you add extra weight, you then have to add extra fuel to carry that extra weight. And then you have to add extra fuel to carry that extra fuel. And, there's much more of a penalty for weight on a hovercraft than there is on a boat or a bus. And then there's just the problem of what the heck they're good for. I mean, they seem really cool, and wouldn't it be awesome if you could just go from land, drive up the beach, and then drive to your destination in the same vehicle without changing? And the answer there is sure, but. And then the but is all the trade-offs you have to do to make it work. And that kind of is what handicaps the hovercraft in all but the most particular situations. And Maya does, quote, find the right niche for this technology. And unfortunately, it's basically military. It's if you have to make a sea landing up a beach and drop stuff off. But even then, like the US military, I think, has kind of like 99 hovercrafts. That's it. Like, so if the biggest military in the world's got 100 of them, there just aren't that very many of them out there. And she does point out that the British used to run a bunch of ferries. The other place you might do this is going across the English Channel. But nobody's going to let you drive your giant hovercraft around very far in France or in England for that matter. Like they're too noisy and too big and too awkward to drive around urban areas. So they can't really take advantage of their amphibious nature in the end. The last commercial hovercraft running in England ran in 2000, bailed out, and then went with catamaran ferries. They're basically just boats. Okay, and then I'll talk quick about the disc film because I want to get back to my moral of the story. The Kodak disc film is another one of these great ideas, right? Like, imagine the days when all film came in rolls and, cameras had to have a certain thickness. The idea was if we could just slim it down by flattening the roll film out, people could like slip these in their purses or in their pocket and it would be more convenient. And that's the future we're all living in today, where your mobile phone is your camera, right? Like that's kind of the same form factor as these Kodak disc film cameras, except this was back in 1980. And so what they ended up doing was engineering a little cartridge that has basically like a Viewmaster slide in it with a bunch of unexposed negatives around the edge. 15 of them, 8 millimeters by 10 millimeters, so relatively small. And I think that's the first real problem here, is that to make this thing technically work at all, there was both a complex case for it, half as many negatives as would fit on a roll of film, and they were 10 times smaller than the negatives on a normal 35 millimeter film. And so the quality was just crappy. And I guess Kodak thought they were going to make up for it with a new chemistry. They used like a super high resolution new emulsion chemistry for it. But that only got them kind of a factor of 2 or 3 on the resolution. So in the end, the pictures that came out of this thing just sucked. And And to make them flat, of course, you also have to make the lens flat. And that meant they had to use a flat, and at that point, plastic aspherical lens to make a lens that's that flat. And ironically, this is kind of the beginning for what we have in our cell phones these days, these like pancake aspherical multi-element lenses. Except back in 1988, their injection molding was not as good. They were trying to push their margins and the lenses were just crappy too. So let's see. You've got a crappy lens and a tiny negative that's going to have bad resolution, but it's small and it fits in your pocket. And you've got a boat that can go on land and can go on the ground, but it doesn't have anywhere to drive on the ground, and it's horribly inefficient when you compare it to boats. They both seem to be projects where they're trying to get their cake and eat it too. They're trying to get the best of both worlds in a way, but then they end up compromising stuff for it. And of course, there are always design trade-offs. And like, I think about my projects, and there are definitely times where I have to either I'm going to have it run for 5 minutes or I'm going to have to put a bigger battery on it. And you do have to make these design trades all the time. But I think the warning sign should be when you make these design trades and one of the things you're trading off is like one of the critical functions of the device. Like the Kodak people should have had alarm bells ringing when their camera made crappy photographs, right? No matter how cool the tech is and how, amazing it is in 1980 to have a flat camera, it made bad photographs. And that's kind of essential to a camera. And ditto the hovercraft. Like if you're going to make a hovercraft that's meant to be a civilian transport hovercraft, it has to operate quickly. It has to be comfortable to ride in. It has to be cheap to operate. And, in the end, of course, it didn't serve any of these. And the one thing it could do was only usable in very tiny little niches. I mean, I'd totally love a hovercraft. I would be absolutely happy to tool around in my crazy hovercraft around here, but I'm sure the police would pull me over and that would be the end of that game. Anyway, I think my moral of the story here is that both of these projects, both the hovercraft and the Kodak disc camera, had to end up making kind of some fundamental trade-offs that hurt the basic thing that they wanted to do. Let this be a warning sign to you. If you find yourself in this position where you're like, yeah, but if I do that, it won't be able to run very long, and it's something that you need to run all day, then you do need to put the bigger battery in it.
Well, I cheated also because I chose my own. I chose the one, keeping with Kristina, the one with the funny keyboard. Depending on your taste, it's a funny keyboard. It's a comical keyboard, at least. But we'll get to that soon enough. First up, we have a project from Hackaday IO in the form of a giant physical save button. It's essentially some foam board stickers, a Arduino shell, a push button, and some wires, but the end result is quite cool and useful. Basically, pushing the floppy disk sends Control-S over USB-C, though of course you could program it for any macro you want. MakeStream has really nice instructions if you want to make one for yourself or for someone else who is always forgetting to save. Next is the external pick of the week, which happens to be a compact folding keyboard from a Redditor named Sushi with many eyes. I never counted the eyes, I just copied and pasted it.
Smart.
For Ren. There's your answer, Ren. I didn't add any eyes. It sort of resembles a concertina, this one, and the original plan was to have folding thumb clusters. The linkage to get that working was a complete nightmare, however. This bad boy runs on a pair of super mini NRF52840s, plus a third board that became the dongle. Actually, it runs on 6 IKEA Lada nickel metal hydride AAA cells that Sushi had laying around, that the integrated lithium-ion charger, quote, shouldn't explode based on research. Yeah. But another nightmare was the programming. After going through the ZMK setup, the thing just would not show up on any Bluetooth device at all. Several hours of checking absolutely everything later, Sushi went back to the guide and found out there was an errant space in the code that screwed up everything.
Oh my god.
Apparently this version is wobbly. The new version will have a reworked hinge, and this will address the wobble. Darn those spaces and semicolons and lack thereof. Now we come to the centerfold. Ah, the centerfold. This one is kind of hard to look at for too long, but that doesn't make it any less lovely, depending, of course, on your taste. And although it looks like a drawing, this is in fact an actual working keyboard. The keycaps came like that, and X Factor X reworked the rest of the keyboard to match. How, you might be asking? By covering it with masking tape and going at it for probably a very long time with a fine-tipped marker. I think it looks great. It's not something I don't think I can handle it, but I think it looks great.
You have to see this in real life. It is like an optical illusion. It looks like, the AHA video Take on Me? It looks like that is taking place on your desktop. It is not possible. You would need to see it in real life.
I don't know if I can handle it in real life.
I don't know if I could either.
Next up is this installment's historical clacker, which is the Defy typewriter. So what did it defy exactly? Well, typical typewriter prices of the day, which in this case was the very early 1900s. Most machines of this era were in the $60 to $100 range, but the Defy cost a cool $25. And unlike the picture in the write-up, the Defy actually came with a wooden base and not a metal one, which made it quite light at around 9 pounds. And this foot-square machine had a 3-row, 84-character keyboard with 2 shifts. Every key seems to have a second function, aside from uppercase, of course. My favorite part of this typewriter has to be the Element, which looks like one of those old ink blotter things that you'd find on an old-timey desk. You know what I'm talking about? The rocker things that blots your ink.
Looking at it, yes.
I should have maybe put a pic, but then I would have had to written more about it, and then it'd be really long. But I'm trying to encourage the people to go see the link, go visit.
You guys have to click through.
Yeah, click through. Read what I didn't tell you, which was about basically the guy and the production house and what happened.
Ooh, what happened?
Obscurity.
Okay.
IIRC faded into obscurity.
Very good.
Yeah. So bringing up the rear is the In Case You Missed It section, which spotlights a new old keyboard build. Do you remember the Don Lancaster TV typewriter? Well, this is the ASCII keyboard that went with it, and it appeared originally in the February 1973 issue of Radio Electronics magazine. Artem Kalinchuk recreated this keyboard not once, but twice. One time that's true to the original key switches, and another, a more practical version that's meant for MX switches. Both are up on GitHub if you want to make one for yourself. You'll also need to build the ASCII encoder board, but that shouldn't be too difficult as it's mostly just a few ICs, diodes, and transistors. I would love to see a clear acrylic case on this thing, or anything really, because you know me and I love clear things.
That board looks like it's home etched, and I'm pretty sure it might be, but it also is silvered. It's also tinned. Maybe it's not. I was at a retro computer festival recently, and the dude had this marvelous board that looked like it was homemade, exactly like this. And I asked him about it, and he said, yeah, the trick is you just don't get a solder mask put on it. You can actually order boards even from regular board houses and just tell them to put no solder mask on it. And it gives it this absolutely lovely, like hyper retro look. I mean, here the traces look hand drawn too. So
yeah.
But, completing the look. But you could do that in your CAD tool, too. Anyway, cool technique if you're looking for, a super retro aesthetic in your boards is just con the board house into not putting any solder mask on it. I think you have to be fairly explicit with them when you do crazy things.
I have yet to do crazy things.
Well, that wraps it up for this week's Hackaday podcast. Thanks very much for listening. If you want to check out the links, head on over to hackaday.com/podcast. If you see anything cool or do anything cool, write us an email, tips@hackaday.com. And until next week,
keep on hacking.
Doodaloo-doo. I was a tenth of a second late.
Uh-oh, I am unprepared.
Aluminum foil.
Yes.
Yes. My What's That Sound skills are unbeatable.
Got some coffee left. Trying to spread it out. Dwingeloo.
That's half the reason I picked this one.
That's got to be in the title, right?
Should we say Dwingeloo or Dwingeloo? Probably Dwingeloo, because I think they're Dutch. But dope.
Uh-oh.
It's all good. I can recover.
Okay.
I'm going off script,
Oh dear.
so look out. This is gonna be radical.
Oh dear.
Yoo-hoo. Dwingeloo. Oh geez, it's Dwingeloo.
I'm just a Dwingeloo everywhere I go.
Oh my god. Yeah.